Once upon a time, there was a quiet young woman named Grace. She had kind eyes, dark skin like polished wood, and moved like someone who didn't want to disturb the world. Grace didn't talk too much. She listened more than she spoke. People often forgot she was in the room, but she always saw everything. Grace had just been hired as a maid at the Kingsley estate, the biggest house in all of Belmont Hills. The house sat on a hill like it owned the town, with walls so high they hid everything inside. Grace had never been inside a house that big before. The gates alone were taller than a tree. On her first morning, Grace stood outside the tall double doors with her small suitcase and held her breath. A butler opened the door, stiff, serious, and pale. He didn't smile. "You're the new maid?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Grace said, her voice soft. "Follow me." She followed him through rooms bigger than her whole house. Shiny floors, giant windows, paintings of rich people with cold eyes. Everything looked perfect. But Grace could feel something else under the surface, something quiet but not peaceful. Like a secret, they stopped in front of a wide staircase. "You'll be in the East Wing," the butler said. "Your main task is Mr. Ethan." "Sir." "Mr. Ethan Kingsley, 19 years old, the only son. He is visually impaired." "Blind." The butler cleared his throat. "Yes, but we don't say that word here. You will care for him, guide him, but do not get too familiar. He doesn't like questions. And he doesn't like help." Grace nodded slowly. "Understood." The butler led her down a hallway with thick rugs and golden light. He stopped at a door and knocked twice before opening it. "Mr. Ethan, your new assistant is here." Grace stepped inside. The room was dark, even though the curtains were open. A tall boy sat in an armchair, facing the window. His head turned slightly at the sound of their voices, but his face didn't change. His eyes didn't move. Grace stared for a second. His skin was pale like he never went outside. His hair was dark and a little messy. And his face, it looked strong but tired. Not sleepy, just tired of everything. "Hello," Grace said. No answer. "This is Grace," the butler said. "She'll be helping you from now on." Still, Ethan didn't speak. He didn't even nod. The butler gave Grace a look, something between warning and pity, and left the room. Grace stood there quietly. She didn't know what to do next, so she walked to the side table and picked up a glass. "Would you like some water, sir?" she asked. "I'm not a sir," Ethan said, voice flat. It was the first thing he said. His voice was low and sharp. "Okay," Grace replied. "Would you like water, Ethan?" "I didn't ask for water." Grace placed the glass back without saying a word. He turned his head slightly, like he could feel her standing there. "You'll get tired and leave like the others," he muttered. "Maybe," Grace said. "Maybe not." There was silence again. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind. Grace walked slowly to the window and closed the curtain halfway, soft enough not to startle him. Then she sat in the chair across from his. "I don't mind sitting quietly," she said. Ethan said nothing, but he didn't ask her to leave either. The next few days were quiet just like that. Grace woke early, cleaned his room, prepared his meals, and helped him walk through the garden when he allowed it. Sometimes he refused to speak. Other times he would just nod or point. But Grace didn't push. She talked only when necessary. Ethan's father, Mr. Kingsley, was rarely home. When he stayed in his office. Tall, cold, and full of money, Mr. Kingsley never smiled. He treated Ethan like a piece of glass, something expensive and useless. The staff didn't say much, but Grace heard whispers. "Born blind," one maid said. "It was a shame. He was supposed to take over the family name." "Some say it's punishment," said another. "For what happened to the mother?" "Shoo," said a third. "Don't talk about that." Grace didn't ask, but she listened. One evening, Grace was cleaning Ethan's room when she heard something. Music. She froze. Ethan was alone on the couch, facing the fireplace. His head was tilted slightly up, and he was humming. Not just random sounds, perfect notes, like someone who had memorized every sound in the world. It was gentle, sad, beautiful. Grace slowly backed up, trying not to make noise. She stepped on a wooden board and it creaked. Ethan stopped humming instantly. "Who's there?" he said sharply. "It's me, Grace." He turned toward her, and though his eyes didn't focus, something about his face had changed, like he'd been caught. "I didn't mean to listen," she said softly. "You shouldn't have. I didn't know you could sing." "I don't," he snapped. "You just did." He stood up suddenly, knocking over a pillow. "Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. You think I don't know when people are watching me? You think I don't feel it? I'm not stupid." "I never said you were," Grace replied calmly. He took a deep breath and faced the window again. "Everyone lies here," he muttered. "They pretend I'm broken, that I'm not a real person. They bring in maids and nurses and guards like I'm a project. But I know what they say." "I haven't said anything," Grace said. "That's why I let you stay." Grace lowered her head. She felt something strange. Like this wasn't just anger. It was pain hiding inside anger. "I'm just here to help," she said. Ethan turned his head slightly. "Then don't ask questions," he said quietly. "Ever." Grace nodded once. "Okay." But inside her, a new thought had already started growing. Something didn't add up, and it all started with that voice. Grace didn't sleep much that night. She kept thinking about the way Ethan had hummed, the way each note was perfect, like someone who had seen music, and the way he stopped the second he heard her, not when he saw her, but when he felt her nearby. It made her stomach turn, not from fear, but from curiosity. Something about Ethan didn't feel right. Not his attitude, not the way he moved, and certainly not the way he reacted. The next morning, Grace entered his room with fresh towels. Ethan was sitting on the edge of his bed, still in his pajamas. His hands were on his lap, but his head turned toward her the moment she stepped through the door. "You walk too softly," he said. "I'm sorry," she replied. "No. I mean, most people walk heavy. You don't. That's why I notice you." Grace folded the towels slowly, keeping her eyes on him. "Is that a bad thing?" Ethan shrugged. "It's just a thing." She didn't say anything more, but her mind was racing. How did he know how she walked? Could he hear footsteps that clearly? She placed the towels on the shelf and turned to leave when Ethan spoke again. "Don't tell anyone I sang." "I won't." He nodded once, then lay back on the bed, turning his face away. That afternoon, Grace watched him from a distance as he walked through the garden path behind the house. The sunlight was bright, but Ethan didn't wear glasses. He walked slowly, cane in hand, tapping the stone walkway. Grace followed, a few steps behind like always. But something strange happened. Ethan stepped around a fallen watering can without touching it. No warning, no tap of his cane. He just knew it was there. Grace froze. She looked at the can, then at Ethan, then back at the can. He didn't stop walking. She hurried to catch up. "Ethan?" she asked. He didn't turn around. "How did you know that was there?" "What?" "The watering can. You stepped around it." "I didn't," he said. "But I didn't see it, Grace," he snapped. His voice was sharp, colder than the wind. Grace swallowed her next question. "I'm just making sure you're safe. I've been walking this path for years. I know every crack, every rock, every turn." Grace didn't believe that. Not fully. She'd cleaned that part of the path yesterday. That can wasn't there. It had just fallen a few minutes ago. There was no way Ethan could have known. But she said nothing. He stopped walking and turned to her. "Don't start thinking I'm faking it." "I didn't say that." "You're thinking it," he said, almost like a warning. Grace met his cloudy eyes. "I'm only thinking you're more aware than people give you credit for." He didn't answer. He turned and kept walking. Later that evening, Grace brought dinner to his room. She placed the tray down and opened the lid. Grilled chicken, rice, vegetables. She always arranged it in the same way so Ethan could remember where everything was. But tonight, she decided to test something. She swapped the spoon and fork. Then she stepped back. Ethan sat up in bed and reached for the tray. He picked up the fork in his right hand, then paused. He frowned. Then, without touching it, he reached with his left hand and took the spoon instead. Grace's heart beat faster. He hadn't even felt for it. He just knew. She couldn't keep quiet. Why did you switch hands? He slowly turned toward her voice. Why did you switch the spoon and fork? Grace blinked. How did you know I did? Because you're not as quiet as you think you are. She took a step forward. But you didn't touch them before that. He raised an eyebrow. Do you really want to go down this path? I just think. Stop thinking, he shouted, slamming the tray. The plate rattled and some rice spilled onto the bed. Grace flinched. Ethan took a deep breath and leaned back. I know what you're doing, he said softer now. You're testing me. I'm not trying to hurt you. Everyone tries to uncover me. Everyone wants to fix me. But I don't need fixing. Grace stepped closer. Ethan, I don't think you're broken. He didn't respond. His jaw was tight. His hands clenched the blanket. You think I'm lying? He asked. No. You think I'm pretending to be blind? No, I think something is not being said. And I don't think you're the liar. I think you're hiding because you're scared. He turned his face away. You're wrong. But his voice was shaking. Grace moved the tray gently, picking up the spilled rice. You don't have to tell me anything, she said. But I'm not going anywhere. You don't scare me. He chuckled, a short, dry sound. You should be scared. Why? Because I see things, Grace. She looked at him, confused. I thought. I know what I said. He interrupted. He picked up his cup slowly, took a sip of water, then put it down with care. Sometimes, he whispered, the world goes quiet, and in that silence I see things. Things I shouldn't. Grace stood very still. He didn't look at her. His voice was low, like it was meant only for the darkness. I can feel the air change when someone lies. I can hear pain in someone's footsteps. I can smell fear when it enters a room. He took another breath. And sometimes, I see light in flashes. But it's not normal light. It's wrong. Like memories that aren't mine. Like shadows moving when no one's there. Grace's fingers tightened around the tray. Ethan, have you told anyone this? He gave a small, bitter laugh. And have them lock me up? No thanks. But, I said don't ask questions. He snapped again. Then softer. Please. Grace looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay. She carried the tray out of the room. But her mind was no longer calm. What kind of blindness let someone feel lies? What kind of darkness gave someone visions? This wasn't just about being blind. Ethan was hiding something much deeper. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room down the hall, staring at the ceiling. The wind outside made the trees tap gently against the window. Her thoughts kept returning to the way Ethan avoided the watering can. The way he switched the spoon and fork. The way he knew she was watching. And the way he spoke about light and shadows like they were people. Something wasn't right. And whatever it was bigger than her job. But she wasn't scared. She was curious. And curiosity was a dangerous thing. The next morning, Grace walked into Ethan's room like usual. The bed was made. But Ethan wasn't there. She checked the bathroom. Empty. Her heart skipped a beat. She rushed down the hall, through the drawing room, then outside into the garden. She saw him standing under the big oak tree. No cane. Just standing. His face turned slightly toward the sun, eyes closed. Grace walked slowly toward him. You're not supposed to be out here alone, she said softly. He didn't move. I wanted to feel the sun, he replied. She stood beside him. You left your cane. I didn't need it. Grace looked at his feet. There were 3 steps in the path where a gardener had left tools. Ethan had walked around them perfectly. No hesitation. You're not blind, she said before she could stop herself. He turned to her. Face calm, voice low. I am. Not completely. I never said I was completely. Grace stared at him. So what are you? He didn't answer right away. Then he whispered, I don't know. She didn't speak. He went on. Sometimes I see nothing. Sometimes I see too much. I close my eyes, and I see colors that don't exist. I open them, and I see people who aren't real. He turned his face toward her. Is that blindness? Or something worse? Grace's breath caught. You've never told anyone? He shook his head. My father thinks I'm useless. If I told him this, he'd lock me in a hospital. And your mother? He looked away. She's gone. Grace swallowed. I'm sorry. He didn't reply. Later that day, Grace stood at the window, watching Ethan as he sat in the garden again. The sky had turned gray. Rain was coming. She watched as Ethan lifted his hand and reached out toward the air, like he was feeling something invisible. And that's when she realized something. He wasn't blind to the world. He was seeing a part of it that no one else could. And maybe, just maybe, it was trying to show her something too. Morning came with a soft mist that covered the Kingsley garden like a thin white blanket. Grace walked toward Ethan's room with a calm face, but inside she felt tense. The things Ethan said yesterday kept replaying in her mind. The flashes of light, the shadows, the strange movements he made with no cane. None of it felt normal. Grace knocked gently and opened his door. Ethan wasn't there. Again. Her heart jumped. She hurried down the hallway, almost running, until she reached the back door that led to the garden. She pushed the door open. Ethan was standing under the same big oak tree. But this time he wasn't alone. The gardener, Mr. Paul, was trimming branches near the top of a ladder. He was humming loudly, not even aware of the broken branch above him, about to snap. Grace felt her chest tighten. The branch cracked. Loud, sharp, dangerous. Paul! She shouted. But Ethan moved before she even finished the name. He stepped forward in one clean motion, lifted his hand, and grabbed Paul's ladder. Paul gasped and nearly fell, but Ethan held the ladder steady with surprising strength. The branch fell behind him, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Grace froze. Her breath stopped. Ethan had reacted faster than someone who could see perfectly, not slower. Paul climbed down, trembling. My God! I didn't even hear that. How did you know it was falling? Ethan's face went blank. Lucky guess, he muttered. Grace felt something sink inside her chest. She walked toward them slowly. That wasn't a guess, she whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. Paul thanked him again, then hurried away, still shaking. Grace waited until he was out of sight before she spoke again. You moved before the branch cracked. No, I didn't. Yes, you did, she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was calm and certain. You heard something else. Something I didn't hear. Or, she swallowed. Or you sensed it. Ethan stepped back. Grace, stop. She followed. Why can't you just tell the truth? There is no truth to tell. Ethan, you grabbed that ladder the way a person grabs something they see. He turned sharply, his voice rising. Grace, stop. I said stop. I won't, she said softly. Not this time. He walked away from her, moving fast through the grass. Grace walked beside him even though he didn't want her there. He kept moving. She kept following. Finally, he stopped in the shade behind a stone bench and sat down. He ran his fingers through his hair, breathing hard. Why do you care so much? He asked, voice shaking. Because you're hurting, she answered. And I can see it. He didn't reply. His hand trembled slightly. His face looked pale. Grace sat on the stone bench beside him. Ethan, talk to me. He stood up again, pacing now. You don't understand. Then make me understand. He shook his head. You'll think I'm crazy. No. You'll leave like the others. No. You'll run to my father. I won't. You don't know him. Then tell me. Ethan pressed his palms against his eyes. Just stop asking questions. Grace stood and walked closer. I'm not your enemy. Then why do you look at me like that? He asked. Like what? Like I'm lying. Like you see through me. Grace shook her head. I don't think you're lying. I think you're scared. Ethan's breath caught. His voice dropped so low she barely heard it. You don't know what I see. Then tell me. He didn't. She waited. He turned away again, but she stepped in front of him. He froze. She didn't touch him. She just stood there, close enough for him to feel her presence. After a long moment, he whispered, "Sometimes I don't see the world the way you do. I don't see trees and houses and faces. I see shapes, bursts of light, waves in the air, moving things that don't move like real things." Grace watched his throat move as he swallowed. "It's not like seeing with eyes," he continued. "It's like seeing with something else." She listened, quiet, patient. "Sometimes it hurts," he said. "Sometimes it feels like my head is going to break open if the lights flash too much." Grace nodded slowly. "How long has this been happening?" "Since I was little," he whispered. Her heart squeezed. "And no one knows?" "No one," he said. "Not even my father. Not the doctors. No one." "Why didn't you tell them?" "Because I couldn't explain it," he said. "They already treated me like a broken toy. If I told them I saw things no one else did, they would think I was losing my mind." Grace looked at him carefully. "And the accident today? You saw something?" Ethan hesitated. Then he nodded. Grace stepped closer. "Tell me what you saw." He kept his eyes down. "A flash. Of light." "No," he said. "Of movement. Something moved fast in the corner of my mind. Like the air shifted. Like someone pushed the world in a different direction for just 1 second." Grace swallowed. "And that told you the branch was falling?" "Yes," he said. "It's like I felt it before it happened." Grace felt her skin prickle. "That's not blindness." Ethan lifted his head. "But it's not sight either," he said. "What is it then?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know," he whispered. They stood quietly for a moment, the wind brushing past them. Grace finally spoke. "You're not crazy." Ethan laughed a little, but it was a sad laugh. "You don't know that." "I do." "How?" "Because crazy people don't save lives with their eyes closed," she said. "But you did." Ethan turned away. She could see fear in his posture, the way his shoulders sank. Grace stepped beside him. "You're not alone." "You say that now," he murmured. "But when you understand everything, you'll leave." "No," she said firmly. "I won't." He didn't reply. She waited again. After a moment, Ethan took a small breath and spoke very slowly. "Grace, the things I see, they're not always safe." A chill ran through her body. "What do you mean?" He turned his face toward her, and his eyes, even though they couldn't focus, looked strangely haunted. "Sometimes," he whispered, "the shapes look like people." "What kind of people?" He shook his head. "Not normal ones. They move wrong. They bend wrong. They flicker, like shadows that don't belong in this world." Grace's heart thumped. "They watch me," he said. She froze. "They follow me," he added. She almost stopped breathing. "And when I close my eyes..." He lifted his hand to his forehead. "They come closer." Grace whispered, "Ethan." He stepped back, his voice rising. "You wanted to know. Now you do." "But you wanted the truth," he said louder. "That's the truth." Grace stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. He began pacing again, running his hands through his hair. "I can't control it. I can't stop it. Some nights I hear them whisper. Some days I feel them standing beside me." Grace's lips parted. "Whisper?" "Yes." "What do they say?" He let out a slow, shaky breath. "I don't know. The words don't sound human." A cold silence filled the garden. The trees didn't move. The wind didn't move. Even the birds stopped chirping. Grace felt a chill crawl down her spine. She took a brave step toward him. "Ethan, has anyone ever hurt you? Is someone doing this to you?" "No," he whispered. "This isn't a person. This is something else." She didn't understand, but she felt the weight of his fear. Ethan put his hands on the stone bench and leaned forward, breathing hard. Grace placed her hand on the bench but not on him, close enough so he felt she was there. He didn't pull away. "You're not lying," she said softly. "No. And you're not imagining things." "No." "Then we'll figure it out," she said. He lifted his head a little. Yes, she said firmly. You're not alone anymore. Ethan didn't speak for a long time. His breath slowed. His shaking stopped. He straightened up. Then he said the quietest words she had ever heard from him. Thank you. Grace nodded. Rest now. You saved someone today. Let me help you. He didn't argue. He didn't push back. He let her guide him back toward the mansion. For the first time, Ethan didn't fight her hand on his arm. For the first time, he walked as if he trusted her. But as they reached the door, Grace looked behind them at the oak tree, and for a split second, she thought she saw something dark move behind the trunk. A shadow that didn't belong to any person. A shape that didn't move like it should. When Grace blinked, it was gone. But her heart was no longer calm. Ethan wasn't imagining anything. Something truly was watching. And this was only the beginning. Grace didn't talk much that evening. She prepared Ethan's dinner in silence, her hands moving slowly. Her mind was still stuck on what she saw, that shadow behind the tree. That flicker. That strange movement. She kept trying to tell herself it was just the wind. A trick of the light. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Something was there. And whatever it was, it didn't want to be seen. When she brought Ethan's dinner tray into the room, he was sitting near the fireplace. His head was down. His hands rested on the arms of the chair, motionless. I brought your food, she said gently. He nodded but didn't speak. She placed the tray on the table beside him and sat on the edge of the couch. She waited. The fire crackled between them, casting soft orange light across the room. I saw something, Grace finally said. Ethan turned his head slowly toward her. What? In the garden. After the branch fell. After you saved Paul. His face grew tight. What did you see? Grace swallowed. A shadow. Behind the tree. But it didn't move like a normal person. Ethan's hands gripped the chair tightly. I believe you now, she added. About everything. He didn't say anything. I don't think it's just in your head, she went on. I think you're seeing something real. Something no one else can. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That's not all. What do you mean? He looked toward the fire, his voice quiet. I told you I see flashes. I told you I feel things. But I didn't tell you what really happened. The first time it started. Grace leaned closer. When was it? I was 5. She waited. Ethan's eyes stayed unfocused, but his tone turned cold. My mother had just died. Grace's heart skipped. She hadn't heard him talk about his mother before. The staff never spoke of her. The house had no pictures of her. It was like she'd been erased. She died in this house, Ethan said slowly. In this room. Grace turned to look around. Everything looked normal. Clean. Warm. Quiet. But Ethan's voice made the air feel heavier. I was there, he continued. That night. I wasn't supposed to be. I had a nightmare. I ran into my parents' room. But they were fighting. Grace didn't move. She was crying, Ethan said, his voice trembling now. She was begging my father to leave her alone. I heard glass break. I heard her scream. He stopped for a moment and wiped his palms on his pants. I hid behind the dresser. I didn't want them to see me, but I saw something else. Grace's hands pressed against the edge of the couch. There was someone else in the room, Ethan whispered. Grace blinked. Someone else. Yes. A person. I don't know, he said. It didn't look like a person. It was tall, thin, black, like a shadow stretched out. It stood in the corner watching, not moving. Goosebumps ran down Grace's arms. It didn't help her. It didn't speak. It just stared. And when she fell to the floor, it turned and looked at me. Ethan paused. I felt something cold inside my head, he whispered. Like it touched my thoughts. Like it wanted me to forget what I saw. Grace sat very still. I passed out, Ethan said. When I woke up, my mother was gone. They told me she fell down the stairs. Grace's eyes widened. But she didn't, did she? He shook his head slowly. No. She died in the room. I saw it. I heard her scream. And your father? He said I was sick, that I was confused. That I didn't understand death. Grace leaned forward. Did he see the shadow too? I don't know, Ethan replied. He never mentioned it. He just said I was having trauma. The doctors said it was too much stress. They said I went blind because of it. She frowned. Is that even possible? They said my eyes were fine, Ethan whispered. They did all the tests, but I couldn't see anymore. I refused to see. Grace's heart dropped. You shut it off, she said. Ethan nodded. I didn't want to see anything after that, especially not that shadow. But it came back? Always, he said, even when I didn't want it to. At night, in mirrors, behind doors, watching. Grace's breathing slowed. So this whole time, you've been seeing that thing? Not just that one, Ethan whispered. Others too. Grace covered her mouth with her hand. I don't know why I see them, Ethan said. But I do. She reached across the space between them and placed her hand gently over his. He didn't pull away. You're not alone anymore, she said softly. He nodded once, barely moving. I want to help, she added. You can't fight shadows. Maybe not, she said. But maybe they're not what we think. He looked at her. What do you mean? Maybe they're connected to something real. A secret. A truth. Ethan looked down. The truth is, my mother was murdered. Grace whispered. And you saw it? Yes. And that thing was a witness too. Ethan didn't reply. Grace stood and walked to the bookshelf on the far wall. She scanned it carefully. Her fingers brushed across rows of dusty books until she saw something strange. A small gap between two books. She pulled them apart. Behind them, tucked into the shelf, was a black leather journal. Ethan, she called. He turned toward her slowly. What is it? She carried the journal over and sat beside him again. I don't know, but it was hidden. She opened it gently. Inside were small, neat words written in faded black ink. The handwriting was delicate, and the first page had a name, Catherine Kingsley. Ethan froze. That's my mother. Grace turned the page. Each entry was dated like a diary. She began to read. June 10th. I feel watched again. The hallway mirror has that cold feeling. I told Gregory, but he brushed it off. He says I'm imagining things again. Grace's eyes widened. Ethan, your mother saw it too. He leaned closer. Grace turned the page. July 3rd. The dreams are getting worse. I keep seeing Ethan crying in a dark room. The shadow is always behind him. I don't think it wants him. I think it wants me. Ethan's hands began to tremble. She knew, he whispered. She tried to protect you, Grace said. They kept reading. July 17th. I think I made a mistake. Years ago, I visited a woman, a healer. She said I was cursed, that something was attached to my family. I thought she was lying. But now I'm not sure. Grace looked up. A curse. Ethan stared at the page. Maybe that's why I see what I see. The final entry read, July 20th. If something happens to me, promise me someone will find this. I won't let it take my son. I won't. Grace closed the journal slowly. Ethan sat frozen, his breath shallow. She knew she was in danger, Grace whispered. He nodded. And now, it's still here, she added. Ethan gripped the armrest. Why is it following me? I don't know yet, she said. But maybe, your mother left more than this journal. Ethan stood suddenly. There's a drawer. In her old vanity. Grace helped him to the bedroom across the hall. It hadn't been used in years. The air was thick with dust. But the vanity was still there, tall, white, with a cracked mirror. Grace opened the middle drawer. Inside was a small silver box. She opened it. Inside was a folded paper and a tiny gold chain. The paper had just 4 words. Trust the light within. Ethan touched the chain. It burned warm in his hand. He didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a tiny, sad smile. She always said that to me, he said. When I was scared. Grace placed the chain around his neck. I think it's time, she said, to find out what this light really is. Ethan nodded. And in the corner of the cracked mirror, The shadow moved again. But this time it didn't come closer. It backed away, like it was afraid. Grace saw it. And for the first time she wasn't afraid either. Ethan sat on the edge of his mother's old bed, holding the tiny gold chain Grace had just placed around his neck. His fingers brushed it gently, over and over again, like he was trying to feel her through it. Grace sat beside him, her back straight, her eyes on his face. She didn't speak. She waited. The diary still lay open on the bed, the last words echoing in her mind. "I won't let it take my son," Grace whispered. "Tell me what really happened, Ethan. All of it." He didn't lift his head. He kept looking down, like the words were buried deep inside his chest. "I tried to forget," he said finally. "For years I tried, but it never left me." Grace's voice was calm. "What happened that night?" He gripped the blanket in his hands. "I already told you part of it. I saw the shadow. I saw my mother fall. But there's more." He turned his face slightly toward her, and though his eyes couldn't focus, his voice held something deeper now, something darker. "I started seeing things before that night." Grace leaned in. "Before she died?" He nodded slowly. "It started small, when I was about 5. One night I woke up crying. My mother came into the room and sat with me. She said I had a nightmare. I told her it wasn't a dream." "What did you see?" Grace asked. Ethan's fingers clenched tighter. "There was a man in the hallway, but his body was wrong. Too thin, too tall. His neck moved like it didn't have bones." Grace felt her throat tighten. "He stood outside my room and just stared," Ethan said. "And when I looked away, he disappeared." He paused. "I saw him again the next night, and the night after that. Always in the hallway, always silent. But each night he came closer." Grace whispered, "Did your mother see him too?" "She believed me," Ethan said. "She told me to pray. She gave me the chain. She said it was blessed." He touched the chain around his neck again. "I wore it every night. And for a while, the shadow stayed away." Grace leaned forward. "And then what?" "My father found out." Ethan's voice dropped lower, tighter. "He came into my room one night and saw the chain. He got angry, said it was foolish, said my mother was filling my head with lies." Grace frowned. "Why would he say that?" "He didn't believe in anything he couldn't see," Ethan said. "He said we were embarrassing him, that we were weak." Grace could feel the bitterness in his voice. "Did he take the chain?" Ethan nodded. "He ripped it off my neck and threw it in the fire." Grace's mouth dropped slightly. "What happened then?" "That same night," Ethan whispered, "I woke up to my mother screaming." He closed his eyes tightly, as if trying to hold back something sharp. "I ran to their room. She was begging him to stop shouting. She said Ethan was seeing things again. She said she wanted to leave." Grace sat still. "She said she was scared." Ethan looked down again. "Then I saw it," he said. "The shadow?" "Yes," he whispered. "But it was different this time." He raised his hands and made a shape in the air. It was taller. It moved like smoke. It didn't walk. It slid across the floor like water. It stood between my parents. And for the first time, it opened its mouth. Grace felt her skin prickle. "There were no words," Ethan said. "Just this sound, like a low growl mixed with wind. It made the whole room shake." He paused. "My mother screamed again. And then, she fell." Grace leaned closer. "Ethan, did the shadow push her?" "I don't know," he said. "I only remember the sound, and the way the light flickered. Then she hit the ground." Grace whispered, "And your father?" Ethan shook his head. He stood there, staring. He didn't move. He didn't cry. He didn't even touch her. She could feel her breath catching. "What did he say?" Ethan's voice cracked. "He looked at me and said, 'You didn't see anything.'" Grace's heart ached. "I ran," Ethan said. "I hid under the stairs. I cried until morning. When the police came, they said she fell. That it was an accident." He clenched his jaw. "My father made them believe it." Grace placed her hand gently over his. He lied. Ethan nodded. To everyone. Even the doctors. What about the blindness? They said it was shock. Ethan explained. That trauma caused me to shut down. But the truth is, I chose not to see. Grace stared at him. I was too scared to see that thing again, Ethan said. So I made myself blind. Somehow. I don't know how. But it worked. He touched his eyes. Until now. Grace felt tears pushing at the back of her throat. You were just a child, she said. And no one believed me, he replied. I believe you, she said. Ethan looked at her. Why? Because I saw the shadow too, she said. Because your mother wrote about it. Because something is still here. He nodded slowly. I think it's tied to this house, she said. And to your family. My mother said it was a curse, Ethan whispered. She said she went to someone, Grace added. A healer. I remember that woman, Ethan said suddenly. She had red beads. She gave me a drink once when I had nightmares. Grace looked at him. Do you remember where she lived? He frowned. No, but I think she had a photo. A small picture of a mountain. Grace stood up. We need to find that photo. Why? Because we need help, she said. And whoever that woman was, she might know how to stop this. Ethan stood up too. For the first time, he didn't reach for a wall or his cane. He walked straight, steady. I'm ready, he said. Grace nodded. Then we start tomorrow. She glanced at the mirror in the corner of the room. The shadow was not there tonight, but something told her it was still watching. The morning after Ethan shared the truth, the mansion felt different. The air was still heavy, but something had shifted. Grace felt it as soon as she opened her eyes. The silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was watching, waiting. She got dressed quickly, tying her scarf with care. Her heart felt tight with both fear and courage. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was now part of a secret that had been buried for years. And she was ready to dig it up. Down the hall, Ethan was already dressed. He stood near the window, touching the gold chain around his neck. Grace walked in and said softly, Good morning. Ethan nodded. I didn't sleep much. Me neither, Grace said. Are you still sure about this? I want to know the truth, he replied. Even if it hurts. Grace walked to the dresser and picked up his mother's journal again. She said the woman who warned her had red beads, and a photo of a mountain. There has to be more, Ethan said. Something my father kept hidden. Somewhere in this house. Grace looked up. Then we have to search his study. Ethan tensed. That room is locked. He keeps it sealed. He doesn't let anyone in. Not even staff. Grace gave a small smile. Then I'll have to break a rule. It was after lunch when Mr. Kingsley left the mansion for a business trip. Grace watched him from behind the curtain as he stepped into his black car and drove off. He never even looked up at the windows. He never noticed her watching. As soon as the gate closed, Grace turned to Ethan. Now's our chance. They hurried quietly down the hall toward the west wing. The door to Mr. Kingsley's study was dark brown with a gold knob. It looked simple, but the lock was strong. Grace pulled out the small set of keys she had borrowed from the butler's storage drawer. Her fingers shook slightly as she tried each one. Click. The third key turned. Ethan stood behind her, holding his breath. You're sure about this? She asked. He nodded. He kept everything from me. It's time I find out what he was hiding. Grace pushed the door open slowly. The air inside smelled like leather, old paper, and dust. The room was filled with bookshelves, tall and packed. A large wooden desk sat in the middle. Behind it was a glass cabinet filled with awards, letters, and one framed photo. Ethan as a toddler with his mother. Grace stepped in first. Ethan followed behind her carefully. This is his world, Ethan said quietly. Grace walked to the desk and began opening drawers one by one. The first held pens. The second, old envelopes and receipts. The third drawer stuck for a moment, then opened with a creak. Inside was a file marked Kingsley Personal. She pulled it out and placed it on the desk. Ethan stepped closer, feeling the edge of the desk with his hand. What is it? Grace opened the file. Inside were documents, legal papers, insurance records, and a photo. She froze. It was a small photo of a red mountain under a dark sky. A woman in a long scarf stood in front of it. Around her neck were red beads. "This is her," Grace whispered. "The woman your mother mentioned." She turned the photo around. On the back, a note in shaky handwriting read, "The healer is in the hills of Dagon." "Dagon," Ethan repeated. "That's far." "Yes," Grace said, "but not unreachable." She kept digging through the drawer. At the bottom was another item. A small cassette tape with the words Catherine, Private written on it. Grace stared at it, then looked at Ethan. "Do you know if this room has a tape player?" Ethan pointed to a silver box on the shelf behind the desk. "There. It plays tapes and radio." Grace placed the tape in the slot and pressed play. A soft crackle came first, then a voice. It was gentle, shaky, and filled with pain. "If you're listening to this, then something has happened to me." Ethan stepped back slowly. "That's her," he said. "That's my mom." Grace's hands trembled as she let the tape play. "I tried to protect him. I tried to stop the thing from coming closer. But it's still in this house. Watching. Waiting. I fear. It's not after me anymore. It's after Ethan." Ethan clutched the desk. "I made mistakes. I went to that woman in the hills. She said it was a blood curse. Passed down. I didn't believe her at first. But now I see it. I see how it watches him. How it listens when he breathes. I'm scared." The voice paused. Then, "If you find this, please protect my son. Don't let Gregory control him. Don't let him silence the truth. Ethan is not broken. He sees what the rest of us cannot. That is not a curse. It's a gift. And it might be the only thing that can stop the darkness." The tape clicked. Silence. Ethan slowly slid down into the chair behind the desk. His hands covered his face. He didn't speak for a long time. Grace sat beside him. "Your mother knew," she said softly. "She knew this would happen." Ethan pulled his hands down. "My father's been hiding everything." Grace nodded. "That's why the shadow stays. It feeds on secrets. On lies." Ethan stared at the wall. "Then we need to end it." "Yes," Grace said. "And that means going to the hills. Finding the healer." Ethan stood up. "We leave tomorrow. But we need to prepare," Grace warned. "We can't just go blind." "I've been blind long enough," he said. "I don't want to be any more." That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She sat in the servants' quarters, holding the tape in her lap. She kept replaying the words in her mind. "It's after Ethan. It listens when he breathes." Chilled her to the bone. She stood and walked to the hallway bathroom to splash water on her face. As she lifted her head to the mirror, she stopped. Her breath caught. Behind her, in the corner of the mirror's reflection, a shape, a tall, thin, black figure. Still, silent. His head was tilted, watching her. She spun around. Nothing. She turned back to the mirror. It was gone. She backed out of the room slowly, heart racing. That night, she slept with the light on. The next morning, Grace met Ethan by the garden. He had a backpack. So did she. "I've packed food, water, and a flashlight," she said. Ethan held the gold chain tightly. "We need to go before my father comes back." Grace nodded. They walked down the back road, past the edge of the estate. A driver waited, an old man from the nearby village who owed Grace a favor. He drove them in silence for 2 hours through rough hills and winding roads until the signs changed. "Dagon," it finally said. The air here was different, colder, quiet. They stepped out into the hills. Grace held the photo in her hand. "She's here. Somewhere," Ethan said. "Then we find her." And behind them, just for a moment, a small wind moved through the grass. But the trees didn't move. The wind wasn't real. Something else had followed. The dirt road that led deeper into Dagon was rough. Every bump in the car made Grace grip the seat tighter. Beside her, Ethan sat quietly, his head slightly tilted like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. The driver, old Mr. Kanu, didn't say a word. He had the look of someone who had seen too much in his life and didn't want to see anything more. Finally, he stopped near a small path between two hills. He didn't look at them when he spoke. "This is as far as I go." Grace nodded and handed him an envelope. "Thank you, sir." He took it without a word, then drove off, leaving a cloud of dust behind. They stood in silence for a moment. The path ahead was narrow, surrounded by tall trees. The sky was gray, and the air felt heavy. Ethan held his backpack in one hand and the chain around his neck with the other. "Do you hear anything?" Grace asked softly. He paused. "It's quiet, but not empty." She looked around. "You mean, something's here?" "Yes," he whispered. "Watching." Grace didn't ask how he knew. She believed him. They started walking. With each step, the world around them grew quieter. No birds, no wind, no sound at all. Grace spoke just to hear her voice. "We're looking for the woman in the photo, the healer. She helped your mother once. Maybe she can help us too." "She knew about the curse," Ethan said. "Maybe she can tell us how to end it." They walked for almost 20 minutes before they saw a small wooden hut nestled between two large rocks. Smoke came from the chimney. A red cloth hung on the door. Grace reached it first and knocked. There was no answer. She knocked again. A soft voice came from inside. "You shouldn't have come." Ethan stepped forward. "Please, we need your help." The door creaked open slowly. A woman stood in the doorway, older than anyone Grace had ever seen. Her skin was wrinkled like folded paper. Her eyes were sharp and dark, and around her neck hung long red beads, just like the photo. "You bring the shadow with you," she said, looking straight at Ethan. Grace held his arm. "It's been following him since he was a child." The woman nodded. "Come in, but be warned. Once you know the truth, you cannot unknow it." They stepped inside. The room was small and dark. Candles burned in the corners. The smell of herbs and smoke filled the air. The walls were lined with strange symbols drawn in white chalk. The woman pointed to two wooden stools. "Sit." They obeyed. She looked at Ethan carefully. "Your mother came to me once. She was afraid, not of death, of what watches death. She told me her family was cursed, and she was right." "What kind of curse is it?" Grace asked. The woman walked to a shelf and pulled down a small wooden box. She opened it and took out a bundle of dried leaves. She spoke as she dropped them into a pot over the fire. "Long ago, one of Ethan's ancestors made a deal. He asked for power, wealth, sight beyond what is normal. In return, he gave something up, his firstborn's vision." Ethan blinked. "But I'm not the firstborn." "You are," she said. "The first of this line since the promise was made." Grace whispered. "What kind of sight did he ask for?" "True sight," the woman said. "The ability to see through lies, to see spirits, to see death before it happens. But such a gift has a cost." Ethan's voice trembled. "The shadows? They're real?" She nodded. "They are spirits, bound to the deal. They follow the bloodline. Some stay hidden. Others grow stronger." Grace leaned forward. "Then why did Ethan lose his sight?" "He didn't lose it," the woman said. "He gave it up. His spirit knew what was coming, to shut the door. But now the door is opening again." Ethan clenched his fists. "I don't want to see them anymore." "You must," she said, "because they see you." She walked to a mirror on the wall and pointed at it. "Look." Ethan turned his face toward it. Grace looked too. First there was nothing, but then the mirror changed. It went black, like the glass had turned into ink. Then a face appeared. No, not a face. A shape, a long, black figure. Faceless, mouth sewn shut, thin arms, eyes that glowed white. It didn't move. It just stared. Ethan gasped. "That's the one. That's the first one I saw." Grace took a step back. "What is it?" The woman answered. "It is the oldest spirit in the chain. It feeds on silence. It hides in mirrors. It punishes those who see what they shouldn't." Ethan whispered. "It watched my mother die." The woman nodded. "And it will watch you die, unless you speak the truth. Grace looked at Ethan. You have to tell the world what you saw. But no one will believe me, he said. They'll call me crazy. The woman said, then they will stay blind, and the curse will stay strong. Ethan turned toward Grace. Can you help me? She nodded. I'll do it with you. The woman took a deep breath. There is one more thing. She walked to the corner and pulled out a cloth. Under it was a book, old brown with symbols burned into the cover. This belonged to the first Kingsley, she said. The one who made the deal. Grace opened it. Inside were pages of writing, names, dates, drawings, and one page that made them both freeze. It showed Ethan, not as he was now but as a child, and below it words, the boy born blind shall see the death of lies. Ethan looked at the words, tears in his eyes. It was always me. Grace whispered, it's not a curse, it's a warning. The woman said, your mother wanted to break it, but she died before she could. Then I'll finish what she started, Ethan said. The woman took the beads from her neck and placed them over his. These are yours now. Speak truth. Do not hide. Face what comes. Ethan nodded. They stood to leave. As they walked out, the woman said one last thing. Do not look into any mirror unless you're ready to be seen. They walked in silence back to the road. The sky was darker now. Storm clouds gathered above. Grace whispered, what now? Ethan said, we go home. Grace asked, are you ready to face him? Ethan nodded. I have to be. And behind them, far in the mirror inside the hut, the figure still watched. But its mouth had opened, and it had started to whisper again. The rain started the moment Ethan and Grace stepped through the gate of the Kingsley estate. Not the kind of rain that falls gently. Poured. Hard. Heavy. Like the sky had been holding back for years and now couldn't wait any longer. Ethan didn't flinch. He walked straight ahead, eyes still white and unfocused, but his steps steady. He wore the red beads around his neck. He held the cursed journal under one arm, and Grace walked beside him, her soaked scarf clinging to her shoulders, her face calm but firm. They didn't speak. Not yet. There were too many words waiting. Inside the house, the lights were dim. The staff looked up in surprise as the two entered, soaked and silent. Nobody asked where they had been. They could feel the change. Something was coming. Ethan walked past them without stopping. He climbed the stairs slowly, gripping the railing tightly, not because he couldn't see, but because he was preparing himself. At the end of the hallway, the door to Mr. Kingsley's office was shut. But Ethan didn't knock. He opened it. His father was standing at the window, looking out over the estate. His back was straight, hands behind him. He didn't turn when he spoke. I see you've returned. Ethan stepped into the room. Grace followed behind him and closed the door. Mr. Kingsley turned slowly. His face was calm. Too calm. I hope your little adventure helped you forget your foolish ideas, he said. Ethan stood still. His voice was steady. I didn't forget. I remembered. Mr. Kingsley frowned. Remembered what? The truth, Ethan said. Grace stepped forward. She placed the photo, the tape, and the journal on the desk. You lied, she said quietly. About everything. Mr. Kingsley looked at her with cold eyes. I don't answer to maids. You do now, Ethan said. Mr. Kingsley's jaw tightened. What did you think you'd find out there, son? Ghost stories? Fairy tales? I found the woman Mom went to, Ethan said. She told us everything. There's nothing to tell, Mr. Kingsley snapped. Your mother was sick. You were traumatized. Ethan stepped closer. You said I didn't see anything, but I did. Mr. Kingsley's hand twitched slightly. I saw the shadow, Ethan said. I saw it standing over her. And I saw you, doing nothing. Grace said firmly. She was pushed. Not by accident. Not by herself. You let it happen. Mr. Kingsley leaned forward. You don't know what you're talking about. Ethan opened the journal. She wrote it. She said you ignored the warning. That you refused to break the curse. Mr. Kingsley's face hardened. That curse is a lie. Ethan held up the beads. Then why does this burn when the spirit comes close? He tossed them on the desk. Mr. Kingsley stared at them but didn't touch them. You knew the truth, Ethan said. You kept it from me. From everyone. I protected you, Mr. Kingsley said. From yourself. You locked me in darkness, Ethan said, and called it protection. Grace opened the tape player. She left a message. For Ethan. For all of us. She pressed play. The room filled with Catherine's voice again. If you find this, please protect my son. Mr. Kingsley flinched slightly. Just for a second. Ethan is not broken. It might be the only thing that can stop the darkness. Silence followed. Ethan stepped closer. You're afraid of me, Mr. Kingsley scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. You're afraid I'll open my eyes and see you, Ethan said. The real you. Mr. Kingsley's face twisted. You are blind. You've always been blind. Ethan whispered, not anymore. And then, in that moment, something changed. Ethan closed his eyes, held them shut. Grace leaned forward. Ethan? I want to see, he said. Mr. Kingsley laughed quietly. You never will. Ethan whispered louder. I want to see the truth. And slowly he opened his eyes. Not wide, just enough. At first, they were still pale and cloudy. But then, a flicker, a faint shimmer. Light. Grace gasped. Ethan. His eyes blinked. He looked around the room. Not with full sight, but not fully blind either. I see you, he said. Mr. Kingsley backed away. And then, the mirror on the far wall cracked. A soft sound. A line appeared through the center. And then the shadow stepped out. Tall, dark, silent. It stood behind Mr. Kingsley, who froze in place, his body stiff. Grace moved toward Ethan. The shadow raised a hand, pointing at Mr. Kingsley. Ethan stepped forward. I'm not scared anymore, he said. The shadow tilted its head. Mr. Kingsley turned slowly, and for the first time he looked afraid. What is that? He whispered. It's the price, Ethan said. The shadow reached out. Mr. Kingsley fell to his knees. Grace shouted, Ethan, stop it. But Ethan stepped between the shadow and his father, and raised the beads. The shadow paused. You want silence, Ethan said. But I speak now. The shadow's hand lowered. I know the truth, Ethan said. You feed on lies. You grow in fear. But not anymore. He lifted the beads higher, and the shadow began to fade. Like smoke, it broke into pieces, and vanished. The room went still. Ethan lowered the beads and turned to his father. Mr. Kingsley was still kneeling, breathing hard. Ethan said quietly, I forgive you. Mr. Kingsley looked up, eyes full of shock. Why? Because I won't carry your fear anymore, Ethan said. And I won't be your prisoner. He turned to Grace. Let's go. She nodded. They walked out together, past the stunned staff, past the quiet halls, into the sunlight. The rain had stopped. Birds were singing. Ethan looked up. He squinted against the light, then smiled. I can feel the sun, he said. Grace smiled back. You always could. 1 week later, Grace packed her things slowly. The small room in the servants' wing was quiet. Ethan stood at the doorway. You're really leaving? He asked. Grace turned. My job here is done. Ethan stepped inside. You did more than a job. She nodded. And you did more than survive. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small note. I wrote this for you. Grace unfolded it. The words were written slowly, but carefully. You were the light in my darkness. Ethan. Tears filled her eyes. She folded the note and placed it in her bag. I'll never forget you, she whispered. He smiled. I'll see you again. She walked past him down the hallway. At the door, she turned. Goodbye, Ethan Kingsley. He smiled, eyes no longer blank, but full of something new. Goodbye, Grace. She stepped into the light. And behind her, in the windows of the great Kingsley mansion, there were no more shadows, only reflections and peace.